Welcome to Three, a show about Federer, Nadal, and Djokovic, and part of the Tennis Channel podcast network. I'm Gill with Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy. Wimbledon Semi-Finals, Nadal, Djokovic, they have booked their ticket to it, but it took 5 sets for each of them with against our power baseliners, Jannik Sinner and Taylor Frtz, who are both very much in certain ways up to the task, in other ways not. And Djokovic coming back from down 2 sets to love, Nadal overcoming some physical issues with his abdomen. We just got finished watching the Nadal match. It is fresh in our minds, so let us start with that. How was Nadal able to win this match without being able to really pump the serve over 115? I mean, he could not serve fast, but he could play well, and he did against Taylor. Amy?
It was reminiscent of a great change-up pitcher. If anyone watches American baseball, he changed speeds. He did pump one in late in the match at 117. So he placed it well. He played the +1 brilliantly. But for me, it was really about a battle between the back of the court and the front of the court. And Taylor Frtz is as good a baseliner as there is on tour right now. He's sensational. He hits great ground strokes, but he doesn't have the confidence, he doesn't have the shots, and he doesn't have the execution once you get in the front part of the court. And whether Nadal was bringing him up there against his will, or whether he tentatively, if rarely, approached, he just didn't have it. And he can set himself up with these amazing ground strokes that he has, pushing Nadal deep in the court, and he chooses not to come forward off of any of those. So he lets Nadal back in these points. He lets Nadal go from defense to offense, which Nadal does better than pretty much anyone ever in the history of the sport, maybe Novak or Roger. And that was, it was just plainly obvious to me. It wasn't that Taylor Frtz folded or choked or anything like that. To me, it was just plainly obvious that he doesn't have the skills. And especially at Wimbledon, you've got to know your way around the front part of the court.
Just amazing. It's what a switch in the evolution of tennis. If you had said to someone, yeah, the guy from Southern California who's tall and has the big serve, who grew up on hard courts, is going to be less comfortable in the court than the guy who grew up in Spain playing on clay, but who played at the baseline and then has become a tremendous forward mover in his way in the contemporary game. I mean, Nadal, 26 of 36 at the net, 10 of 11 in the 5th set. And you're so right, Amy. Taylor couldn't quite take advantage. And there's also a fear factor of doing that against Nadal. The very first point of the decisive tiebreak, Frtz had a short ball, hit a backhand cross court, but didn't do as much with it, and reminded me of the Zverev point in Roland Garros in a tiebreak. And Rafael, it wasn't quite as spectacular a thing, but it was somewhat similar yet again. So here's Nadal. Nadal, the minute he hit the weak return, Nadal began to run to his left because he knew Frtz was going to hit the ball there. And again, yeah, Taylor a little less sure of himself in that front part of the court.
Yeah, you're so right about that. And Nadal's defense was very effective as a result of that. But I want to shift gears to Nadal's offense. And then we got to hit his mental, because that was a big deal in this one. Offensively, Nadal's forehand came on in such a way. And, it was almost like, okay, the guy is serving like he's become a slow ball spot server. But it doesn't feel like he's short on firepower, because his forehand is creating that much damage. And the combination of cross-court short angle to change down the line was so sharp. And Frtz he's not Novak when it comes to the movement department. And I just felt like that was so blatant and obvious when it came to, I felt Nadal's forehand really poked holes in Fritz's movement, because in neutral rallies, the control that Nadal had on that shot was so good, and Frtz didn't have the movement to really hang in there against it.
Particularly, he did not move well vertically. How many times did Nadal get him on a drop shot in some of those pivotal games? And his Fritz has a great backhand, he has a great cross court backhand, but that's just right into Nadal's forehand. And going toe to toe with Nadal on the baseline, you can maybe draw even with him. And I think, in fact, they probably won about the same number of points. But where Nadal has the edge is those other areas, the front court and the mental.
On the ad side, though, Amy, when Fritz was going cross court with his backhand, Nadal was usually first to change line. And he was doing it so effectively that I felt Fritz was losing in that pattern.
Agreed.
Yeah, it's just fascinating how Nadal, I wonder if even the abdominal injury created a little urgency in Nadal, knowing how he had to conduct himself in the rallies, that he knew whether he was feeling some pain. So he's got to get a little more snap and pop, a little more sooner, a little more with the down the line forehand. You're right. The cross court forehand to the righty backhand. Backhands have improved. He's not hitting the cross court forehand to the 2007 backhands. He's hitting that to the 2022 backhands, and they're better. They know that. This is the thing. Both our guys, and we'll talk about this when we get to Novak. They proved why they're the focus of our show in both of these matches. And these guys like Sinner and Taylor Fritz, they're really good. They're a lot better than some of the guys Novak and Rafa played earlier in their career.
Okay, let's shift to the injuries.
Before we go to that, I just want to talk about the baseline just a little bit more, because that really is Taylor Fritz's game. I thought Nadal did a masterful job of varying the height that he gave to Fritz, low to high, drop shots. Sometimes Nadal would drive the backhand. A lot of times he would slice it. And that really drew a lot of errors. How many times did Fritz hit the ball long? Now, those will show as unforced errors. I thought they were really forced. And it was really kind of a masterpiece in varying the types of shots that Nadal gave to Fritz.
As Gill cited in our prior show, that Nadal was going to do some of those things, that he was going to vary some height and depth and speed and spin. And yeah, well done, Coach Gill.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
Yeah, he sliced a ton, and some people thought it was because he was injured. And I was looking at it, I was like, no, I think it's tactical. I think he just wants to slice against Taylor. All right, a lot of people, and maybe we buried the lead here, I don't know. A lot of people thought, well, Rafa's going to retire in the second set, when that was the part in the match where the forehand was stiff, and most importantly, he didn't move. He wasn't moving. And that ended up after the medical timeout, shortly after it got better. What I was thinking in that moment was about what he said at Indian Wells, which is, in these moments, I lose 90% of the time, but if I don't try, then I lose 100% of the time. And I thought, well, Nadal's not going to retire. This is that situation here. And I think even his father wanted him to retire based on the hand signals, and he didn't. Joel, do you agree? Do you think that's why Nadal didn't retire?
Yes, I do agree. And also, a lot of people, I guess, tweets and broadcast commentators and things like that. I mean, we know Nadal. He's 1/3 of the reason we built this show. Nadal's in the quarterfinals of Wimbledon, and actually, Nadal, out of his respect for the game and his opponents and the whole situation of tennis, reminded me of when the rumor that he was going to retire when he won Roland Garros. He wouldn't do that to the event. He wouldn't make himself the story more that he would retire, and we have seen him withdraw from matches when it's incredibly, when it's about 11 on a scale of 10, when it's that bad, as I saw him do. I think he did it versus Cilic one year at the Australian Open. But Nadal's not going to do that. He's gonna fight to the last drop and try to play through the injury. And I guess his dad was that coaching?
Well, it's soon to be allowed, so for me it doesn't really even matter.
I
But
know.
the piece that I wrote going into this match is Nadal out of sorts. I think he is out of sorts. I think I was proven right on that, but that doesn't mean he's not capable of fighting and playing a brilliant match. So in the post match, of course, he's just come off this epic victory, and the third question, the word that Nadal does not want to hear is Kyrgios. And the look on his face, that it's like the color just drained out of his face when he heard that name. And he indicated that he wasn't sure if he was going to be able to play. I mean, fingers crossed that whatever they did to him in that medical timeout, they can do to him again, and he'll have a couple of days and hopefully he can play.
Yeah, I actually think it was the crowd, and I don't think Rafa knew, because I agree. I saw his face. I don't think he knew what to do, because the crowd, they said Nick Kyrgios is next, and everyone was like, "Ooh," like as if like
watch
someone
that
said
again.
a bad
Nadal,
word.
I mean, the whole reason that I knew that Nadal was out of sorts and that I wrote that piece really had nothing to do with what happened in the Sonego match, or the quick serving, or the change in return position. The reason that I knew was his face. He reveals so much with his facial expressions, and we've been watching him now for decades. So the look on his face when the name Kyrgios was mentioned was not a pleasant look.
Yeah, well, that's a tough matchup, and we'll get into that one. But I think Nadal reminds me a little bit of his times with Robin Soderling. Nadal likes to play people who he likes and gets on with well, and then we can compete and just do our business on the court. And doesn't have to take on this whole other extracurricular thing. So when the crowd, obviously the whole world, the whole Nadal and Kyrgios and their approaches to so many things is so different and conflicty, and Kyrgios is liking that, and he's playing great, and all this kind of stuff going on. That's the kind of tumult Nadal doesn't like. Nadal, like a lot of the great players, he likes to keep it minimalist, not extra things kind of impacting. The tennis itself is hard enough, so why create all this other clutter?
Let's talk about the Djokovic Sinner match, and then we will preview the semifinals. Novak lost the first 2 sets, came back from 2 sets to love down for the third time in the last 2 seasons. He did it twice at Roland Garros against Tsitsipas and Musetti. It was very similar to both of those matches, because although you could say like Djokovic escapes from the brink of defeat, did he? Because he got up an early break in all 3 sets, and Sinner never really got overly close to the finish line. So, I mean, I guess the question I'll ask with that in mind, Joel, is like, what was the difference in the sets 3, 4, and 5 compared to 1 and 2?
I think Novak has got to be the most tranquil guy down 2 sets to love that I've ever seen, because he doesn't. He's almost dare. He's not daring. He's not lulling. The other guy is clearly redlining, though you see this thing like by the end of the second set, Novak looks like a beaten and broken man, and yet he just, he took his break, he gathered himself, and again, it comes down, I think, in Novak's case, more than our other 3, to just such good technique, such good balance. It's like he's going to find that level, he's going to up it a bit more, he's going to get a little more consistent. I also noticed he started to hit harder, a little deeper. And he's kind of saying, okay, what have you got, Sinner? You showed me everything you had those first 2 sets. You brought all you had to take your 2 sets to love lead. Well, guess what? I've played a zillion of these matches. And also I think slams are the only place where people play best of 5 now. At least there once was a time people could get a little more seasoning for those. So I just think he just turns up the volume, but it's not extraordinary. It's not these moments where suddenly he's down 4-1 in the third or the fourth, and the guy's got a chance. I mean, I don't know how you guys felt. I thought by about the start of the 4th set that Novak was going to win the match pretty comfortably. What did you think? Start of the 4th.
Yeah, I agree with that. I I think, and boy, can I ever relate to what I'm about to say. He may not even be conscious of it, but I think motivation is so key to Novak's efficiency and success, that to hear from the crowd, they wanted more tennis. He wanted to hear them pulling for him. Subconsciously, I think he is really buoyed by that kind of thing, and he got it. He got it after losing 2 sets, and that was really all he needed to play less passively. And as he said in his post, he noticed that Sinner was losing confidence, and he seized upon that.
Both Novak and Rafa are quite good at also seizing some of the territory, whether it's taking the ball a little earlier, and also getting to net more. And these other guys, you see Sinner and Taylor Fritz, they need to see that as an upside. And they need to say, look, Rafa, early in his career and throughout his career, play a little doubles, do some things, broaden those skills. I mean, we were texting earlier today about a women's match and some different players who don't come to the net as much. And that's a skill that this gets to the whole developmental issue. And I hope players like Sinner and Fritz both begin to do that more, because they sure create the openings.
Right. They both missed some key volleys, Sinner and Fritz, and both of them had to deal with the mental dynamics of the expectation in the match shifting. Fritz seeing that Nadal was injured and suddenly, oh boy, I'm supposed to win. And by the way, I once lost to a player with a torn ab in Australia, Novak, in 2020. Mm-hmm. So this has already happened. I lost against a player with a similar injury. We don't know if Nadal hasn't had an MRI, so we don't know exactly. And then for Sinner, I'm up 2-0. Now I'm supposed to win. And Djokovic said, I think it was amazingly honest of Novak. He could feel on the other side of the net that shift happen. And this is where it comes down to experience and aura of the big three. Both these guys are inexperienced in that position. They haven't been there. They don't really know. They don't have that internal confidence that they can do it. And there might just be some doubt when Novak starts to roll in the third and the fourth set. Oh my God, I'm actually not going to win this.
Right. And then, though, I thought as that fifth set started with Novak and Sinner, I didn't see any chance for Sinner. It wasn't like suddenly like, okay, now we go to the fifth and it's all even and one for the whole thing. It's almost like Sinner was spent, not necessarily physically, not necessarily tired, but kind of ammunition. He didn't have any more ideas. It's like Novak had taken his full measure and seen all his stuff and said, okay, I've seen all your stuff for 4 sets. I've won 36 straight matches on this court. What have you done, young man? And Sinner kind of gulped. And it reminded me of a match a few years ago when Tennis Sandgren had 7 match points on Federer in the Australian Open. And Roger went into, I keep the ball in play. I know how to keep the ball in play. I know how to make you play. I know how to ask you just enough questions. What have you got? And then these guys suddenly see, oh, my technique, my emotions, all the factors that suddenly make tennis difficult.
There's definitely an art to managing expectations, whether it be related to being up 2 sets in a 5-set match or injury, your opponent is injured. And I think that just comes down to staying in the present and focus. And that is an art. I mean, it takes a lot of meditation, which Novak does. And when your mind wanders and thinks about the scoreboard or your opponent's injury, you have to gently pull it back to the present. And these 3 guys, our big 3, are masters at that.
Yeah, and certainly Novak, when he gave himself the pep talk in the mirror that he talked about after losing the first 2 sets, I mean, the number of mistakes that he made for the remainder of the match were so minimal that Jannik really would have needed to earn everything. There was never like a blip or an opening. And in the first set and the second set, that just wasn't true. I mean, Novak, especially on the drop shot in particular, there were mistakes. And then, okay, as soon as Djokovic had the understanding, if I continue to make mistakes, I am going home, there were no more mistakes.
With
Uh,
the caveat that I think Sinner could approach the net more on some of his deeper damaging baseline strokes. But the TV commentator, I think it was McEnroe, said that he has knowledge that Sinner is actually working on this part of his game. So there's hope. There's hope there. But spot on, Gill, about that.
Well,
And
that's
I have knowledge that Frtiz is working on that part of his game. They wanted the forehand. For that's what they've been working on a lot. Go after the forehand, and now next is the transition game, and that's per Paul Annacone.
well, then we see how they go about working on it and what form that takes. Whether it's obviously there's practice and there's stuff that we don't know that they're doing away from the tournament weeks. There's doubles, which is an obvious way. There's earlier round matches against other people. Yeah, it's tricky. It's fascinating to me, player development this way, how that works. I mean, what goes on. Earlier, I was on you mentioned Paul Annacone. I was on a conference call with him last night with some Southern California people talking about that. And I brought up how a lot of parents will say, oh yeah, well, this is the way today's game is played. And my point is, I don't want you to learn today's game. You want to learn the game of tomorrow, not the game of today. The game of tomorrow is going to be today's game. And the game of tomorrow is yesterday's game, because all these shots are extant. Every shot, as creative as Roger Federer is, everything he's done has existed for over 50 years. He just does it really well. So grab that stuff, study that stuff, learn from that stuff. I mean, that's kind of my message to parents and coaches working with players under the age of 15. Instead of I feel almost bad for someone like Sinner. So now comes the time you've learned about the transition. I guess you had so much success doing these other few things. I mean, and then Nadal made that evolution too, while he'd already won the French Open. It's impressive.
Yeah, Sinner's the one guy who has a good excuse for that, though, Joel, since he was only started taking the sport seriously at like 14. Most of these guys are homeschooled by 5.
Okay. All right.
I'm just saying.
Let's see. I look
No,
forward.
I'm just saying. No, you're right. I'm just making a funny point that if anyone gets an excuse, it's Yannick.
And
Okay.
he's still very young. He's still younger than Frtiz. I'm no technique guru. I leave that to the very fine coaches and others that have achieved so much more in the sport. But I will say that a lot of these guys like Sinner and Frtiz, particularly on the backhand volley, whether it be the transition volley or if they're already established up front, they're using a technique that is it's like a cut, like a this, particularly in transition, where you look at Nadal's backhand volley and it's more he's in that base, steady base, like a fire hydrant, and it's the classic this. So I think that they've got a lot of work to do on the very technical aspects of volleying.
Apologies to the audio people there.
I'll say something interesting about the. I'm sorry. Oh, I'll say something about volley technique. I talk to a lot of coaches and I read a lot of stuff about instruction. I think there's a lot of common language about ground strokes, a lot of concurrence about certain terms, whether it's loading, torquing, and rotation. I think when it comes to volleys, you will encounter so many different words and concepts. I mean, Gill, you and I were talking a few weeks ago about how we each see it and what we were taught in different things about lower body, about wrists, about hips. So there's a lot of confusing language about what constitutes effective volley technique, even though we see the output, but the way to get there varies, and it varies in countries, it varies in regions, generations. So as these guys, Frtiz and Sinner, who are great players, improve their stuff, it'll be interesting to see how that surfaces and how that plays out.
Yes, Gill, I'm sorry. I've got to just say, because so many people listen on audio, instead of a cut across the body, it's more a leading with the handle in a straight motion where you get the good shoulder turn. That's the technique that Nadal has.
Right, in lieu of the hand and you're kind of like hitting the inside edge of the ball too much, and then
exactly,
so it's hard to volley cross court that way.
Exactly.
Yes. Let's get to these semis. Norrie, Djokovic, start there. We'll do it like a snake.
Okay.
On the top half. Norrie's British. That's one headline. There's no doubt about that. And he's been, although, putting putting in amazing results, winning Indian Wells last year. I think continuously underlooked and not doesn't get the spotlight. I think that the media spotlight that some other British competitors have, that's about to change. The crowd is going to be in favor of Cam Norrie, and he is incredibly tough physically, incredible endurance, lung capacity, will run for days, and also has a quirky game. And Joel, as the lefty, I'm curious to know what you think of Norrie's interesting game and how that might match up with Novak.
I really like Norrie's game. It definitely has some technical quirks to it, and the backhand's got this staccato thing, a little Connors like, a little like some of the shots you see Rafa hit. Sometimes some different spins and shapes, and the serve has got this kind of little bit hitchy but effective quality. Very good effort to get past Goffin in the quarters. Novak, the only time they played before was last year in Turin at the year end, and Novak beat him pretty easily. But it's a whole other time. But I think it's a tricky one for Cam. I think it's tricky. The lefty with the serve that goes to the backhand. That's good for Novak. So I think that's a tough match for Norrie.
I agree. And I think the one little element that might bother Novak is that the crowd will be so on Norrie's side. But you know what? In a way, it kind of takes the pressure off because he's British. So it's accepted, it's expected. I mean, I will say that my first thought when I found out that it was going to be Norrie against Novak is it's so hard to get good practice time against lefties because lefties are at a premium. So if you're going to play a lefty, it's hard to find, a good lefty warm-up. Well, Novak has set himself up pretty well, potentially giving himself a really good lefty warm-up, potentially against another lefty in the final.
Novak's also got a pretty good lefty in his camp in Goran, who even
True.
though he's a bit older, can still.
I don't know. Do they hit and spar? Is that
I'm not probably not that often, but nonetheless, Goran is classic. You think about how in tennis you don't have, as American baseball, closers and guys, but Goran's a great. You bring him off the bench, throw in some first, baby. Let me work on that return, because that's really what it's about with the lefty part for Novak, is fielding the lefty serve. So for that, Goran could still throw a few big ones in, and that could work pretty well. But I also think Norrie, a totally different kind of lefty than Nadal, of course.
It is. Although, like you said, Joel, the craftiness is there, and the different spins and slices and that kind of thing is alike.
The British crowd, the thing about a Wimbledon crowd, even if it's partisan in a fair way. I mean, it's not going to be.
Yes.
I think they're going to be plenty of people who are going to appreciate Novak's fine tennis. So it's not as if, and Norrie's going to get them in his quarter, but Norrie's not going to whip them up the way you would see in a South American Davis Cup match, where suddenly the crowd is just cheering for everything and cheering false serves and all that kind of stuff. I think it's going to be interesting. I think there are going to be a lot of interesting points. And so again, as with Sinner, does Novak say, okay, I've done the inventory analysis. I've taken in all your stuff. And are you really going to have enough to execute this over the course of, winning 3 sets, playing 5 sets? And that'll be fun. I think for Norrie, it's kind of a magical mystery tour. It's a fun ride. Why not? He's great stuff. I'm not expecting him to win. I don't think anyone else is.
Well, I think that's the big question for me is I'm curious about Norrie's nerves, and I'm a little worried about Norrie's nerves because this is just massive. This is a huge spot for him. And I've seen him in the past. He has lost some finals, doesn't have a great record in finals. It was great that, he got the Indian Wells one, which is the most important one of his career so far, against Basilashvili. But against Goffin, I thought he struggled with his nerves in the previous match. So I am a little bit worried. Now, maybe he's such an underdog. He's playing Novak. Detached from the result a little bit, I can play freely. Maybe. I'm not sure which way that is going to go. I think for Djokovic, it would be surprising, obviously, look, first of all, when he's nervous, he deals with it so well. But also, Wimbledon semi-final, this is the same spot that I've been in the last 3 times I've played the event. So there's that.
Well, and countless experiences, but also I
Yeah.
think when you look at Norrie, okay, so Norrie is sort of a version of an ultimate self-taught guy, even though he's probably had coaching along his way. But there are a lot of hitches in his technique.
Yeah.
You're nervous and not working, and then you got the guy who's as technically sound as anyone in the history of the sport ever. And
It's
that's
it's a tall task. Watching the post-match interview on center court for Norrie, he could barely get out a sentence. He was overcome by emotion. The interviewer was trying to lead him into thanking the crowd, and he just could barely produce the words that he needed to produce. So it's a tall task to play Novak Djokovic on center court at Wimbledon.
and he'd also gotten past Goffin, who to me is kind of like a lighter weight version of a Novak in certain ways with his thing. So if Norrie had to work, that was a career effort for Norrie, but nonetheless, a couple of days off, have some food, hit some balls, get the right attitude, take a ride.
Yeah, I think he needs to try to make this match extremely physical, but this is grass. That's hard. So I don't know if he's going to that's the only way I really see Norrie feeling comfortable or matching Novak is if they're just going to start to play, play a lot of rallies that come down to shot tolerance and who feels stronger in the legs. But man,
grass?
this is grass. This is grass.
This is you think Norrie wants to turn this into clay on Hamburg?
I don't know what else. I mean, yeah, I think, and by the way, I think some of his previous opponents, well, I don't know if I want to say that Goffin fell into that trap a little bit, but yes, I think that's the only advantage that I can find potentially for Norrie is that he might be a little bit tougher if it starts to get to the lungs.
I just don't think Novak he might let it get that way for a while, but he has the skills to get out of that type of situation.
Yeah, but right. And I totally agree. I don't think it's really very feasible. I'm just thinking that's.
I hear you. Like a dog fight, like a Parks and Rec kind of dog fight.
The dog fight that lasts really long with long rallies. See, if I'm coaching Norrie, so you gotta innovate, you gotta ask questions, you gotta take some rips, you gotta come in on some second serves of Novak's, you gotta empty this bucket a little bit and bring your leftiness that way. You're not gonna Guillermo Vilas this guy on grass.
I don't know. He probably does have the skills. I would look at lobbing him because Novak, the one area of weakness is the overhead. So bring him in and try to lob him. Just like completely try to throw off his rhythm and his pace. But I'm not even sure that would work.
Well, yeah, Norrie does some of that innately with some of his strokes because, again, his way of winning physical matches isn't just kind of like grinding down. He does a lot of interesting things. So, okay, so we'll zero in on one thing. First serves. If you see in the first two service games, Norrie's taping or missing first serves, because that's a shot you can control. That's the thing you can really control the tempo of the rally early. And if he's not able to do that, because with nerves and I'm not smitten of Cam Norrie's serve technique, even though it works for him.
Yeah, and Djokovic.
Which stroke is technically sound? The backhand's very flat, right? And the forehand is
he's in the semis of Wimbledon. He's top 10 in the world.
It's over here actually.
Sounder than everybody, but like 7 players in the world. I mean, that's the thing about technically sound. I mean, my backhand is really technically sound against these guys, and then I come up against someone else. And
yeah, good point, Joel.
There are many ways to skin the cat, and Norrie's forehand and backhand work very well in their own ways, especially the backhand on grass. I think it barely bounces. It's so flat. He gets great angles. He moves the ball around the court very well. So he's not like this defensive player. I think that's what you were getting at, Joel. Exactly. And the last thing I want to say before we move on to Nadal Kyrgios is nobody's ever beaten. I think the overhead weakness that Djokovic has, that's the best weakness in the world.
Yeah. I
'Cause
mean,
no,
it's like I was talking off camera with you guys about Berrettini's backhand. It's a bad backhand in the context of the top 10 in the world, but it's not a bad backhand in the context of the top 100. So same deal. It's just if he misses a couple, if you lob him over the backhand side and he has to move around and he misses a couple, potentially that could open the door. But look, I'm all about if you don't have the skills and the shots and the execution to beat one of the big three, then I would be about something radically different instead of just, well, I played my game, I played my best, and I was not good enough on this day. I'm more about try something really out there. Because like a lot of people, I mean, I've been watching these younger guys try to beat our big three for years and years and years and years. And once again, we've got Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal in semifinals of a Grand Slam.
yeah, what I meant is like no one's ever beaten Djokovic by giving him overheads,
Have
right?
they tried?
I
Have
don't
they tried?
know because
So,
I
okay, so
think
here
it
we
might.
go.
Nobody has the chutzpah to
So you
try
want the,
something radical like
so you
that.
want the
I don't
match. You
either.
want you want Norrie open up, kick serve, first serve, get that first serve in, so he's in the rally. Drop shot, in comes Novak, lob.
Open the match that way? No, but if he
Wait.
gets down a couple of sets.
Oh no, but no, that's the thing about innovation. This thing about innovation. Do we start the innovation? Do we start with the innovation, or do we draw to the innovation? And I like your point. If you know you don't have the best chance to win, and you think, oh, I'm going to play my game and do my thing. Oh, I'm going to feel good. I'm going to lose 2, 4, and 3, or do I open with those things? And I open with those things. Yeah. So the first 3 points, I'm gonna drop shot and lob. The thing is though, with Novak and today's players, Novak, he's a pretty good drop shot retriever.
Yeah.
And he comes in and he's going to crack a forehand or backhand that you won't touch. So it's not as simple as like, playing the guy at the park and
no. And again, I don't know. I haven't watched Norrie enough to know where his skills are in this regard. I just watched Rafael Nadal execute half a dozen drop shots, which had the perfect amount of back spin and side spin on them that Taylor Fritz could not run most of them down. Then I saw Taylor Fritz hit a drop shot that had no spin on it and sat right up that Nadal ripped. So I don't know the skill level. I'm just saying my overarching point here is I would love to see somebody try something radically different as opposed to just, well, I did my best.
A PS on Nadal and the drop shot. The thing that makes Nadal's drop shot so effective, I think, is the top spin on his forehand, because he spreads the court more so than even the flat kind of forehands. Because it puts it puts the opponent in such a place back and high, and then they're there. I mean, and then so therefore there creates more space for his drop shot. Anyway, let's go on to Nadal.
Yep, heaviness pushes the opponent back to open up the front court and the space for sure. All right, the most anticipated semifinal of the two, unless you're a Novak fan, and then you're more pumped for Djokovic Norrie, or maybe a Brit also. Okay, there are some populations who might like the other semifinal, but Nadal Kyrgios, they have a Wimbledon history. The first time I think most people heard about Nick Kyrgios was when he beat Nadal at Wimbledon, and he was he was a teenager and he was still serving big, and he hit a tweener that I'll never forget, a tweener winner from the baseline that's kind of cinched in my brain because it was that good a shot. And look, many, many years later, Nick is one step further. Now he is in a semifinal, which is further than he's ever been at a major. His effort has been consistent. At the same time, there have been blowups, high-profile blowups and spats throughout this event. Not to mention, news broke recently that he has a court date in Australia for assault of his girlfriend in Australia. You guys don't need to say anything about that. I just needed to say that it's a thing before we talk about the match, or without just ignoring that.
Yeah, it's alleged. He hasn't been convicted, but it
he has a
appears
court
that it's
date.
going to be alleged in court. Yes.
Right. But as far as the tennis goes, Nick, I think, is a guy who will not game plan for Rafa. He's going to do exactly what he does. And it's the shot making and the quality of that serve is something else. And we have Nadal's health as a factor as well. Amy, what's the main thing to watch in your mind between Nadal and Kyrgios, and what are you most interested to see?
Well, the overall head-to-head, I believe, is 6-3 Nadal, and they're 1-1 at Wimbledon. Don't forget that in their last meeting at Wimbledon, Nadal handled him pretty easily. I think the two big things to watch, like normally I really get into X's and O's and stats and you know, the battles of tactics, but I think the two big things here are not tactical or X's and O's. I think it's Nadal's injury, the extent of it. What will he be able to do on his serve? And the other thing is, will Kyrgios be able to hold it together mentally? He has to this point somewhat. He's had incidents, but he's been able to proceed through the draw okay.
Yeah, I think it's something about Nick Kyrgios. I think Nick Kyrgios is actually kind of a tactical savant in a certain kind of way. I don't know if he plans or doesn't plan. He wouldn't admit it. That I suspect. He wouldn't want to admit it because God forbid Nick Kyrgios admitted that he actually spent time sitting down with a piece of paper or thinking about something. But I think instinct is trained knowledge. And I think Nick Kyrgios has a pretty neat tactical sense, of using the space, of using height, of using depth, of using spin. That's what makes him so appealing and frustrating at the same time, because he sure likes to trot it out when he's playing a big guy on a big court. His career is about not doing it when no one's watching, week in and week out. And I think you two are like this too. I'm a little bit more of a tortoise than I am a hare. I'm kind of a plotter, and I admire people that's why I think David Ferrer. I have a certain respect for David Ferrer, and Kyrgios knows that too. It would have been interesting if Kyrgios had played his compatriot Alex de Minaur in the quarters, because those guys are so opposite in their approach to the game. But I think Kyrgios, it's going to be a really interesting match. I'm thinking about an X and O. I'm thinking about maybe how Nadal returns serve. Maybe that's a factor.
And I think that was a key against Taylor Fritz, who came into the event. Chris Otto posted this stat. 52% of his serves went unreturned. I don't know what it was against Nadal, but it certainly wasn't that. It definitely wasn't that. And these big servers, often against Nadal and Djokovic, they just have to play so much more. And then it becomes a focus thing. Nick might not be able to dig out of his 15-40 without playing a shot other than his serve, because Nadal is just at another level in terms of return skills. So I think that's very interesting and important. I was encouraged by the Nadal return of serve against Frtz.
Kyrgios 30 aces with Nadal. What do you guys think? 30, 25, more?
What has he been averaging per set?
I'm not sure, but I think against Nadal, and I think Nadal's mindset is he's going to get his aces. That's going to happen. It's like in basketball, the guy's going to score a bunch of points, but how do you get in his face more? How do you, when you do have a look at a second serve return, or do you make some surprise returns? Not that they're going to be as forceful as Novak's returns, as much as going to get Rafa in the point, play it deep, and keep Nick from just doing that dictating. He does it so well. I mean, Kyrgios, when he's backing up his serve, whether it's aces or forehands and the backhand, it's very impressive when he's dialed in that way.
It's probably noteworthy that Frtz had not dropped a set going into his match against Nadal. So therefore, the serve efficacy by the fourth set was starting to go down, not necessarily speed-wise, but just because Nadal had been looking at it all day, so he started to catch up to it. That could be a factor if the match is extended against Kyrgios.
And Kyrgios, I think, is a more lively forehand and serve guy than Frtiz. I mean, he's got such a live arm. Now, of course, the other X factor is Nadal's health. It's funny, we talked about the foot. Now we have the stomach.
I think Nadal serves really well against Kyrgios in this matchup. I think that's a big factor. If I can choose righty or lefty, I want to be a lefty if I'm playing Kyrgios because I want to jam him on his forehand return. That's his weak return, and he said that, by the way. And so many right-handers missed the mark tactically against Kyrgios because, and they're used to kicking it to the righty backhand. And okay, I'm on the ad side. It's the second serve, kick serve out wide. That's what I do. That's my second serve against righties, especially. And against Nick, that's just the inferior serve. What Rafa does is he hits that slider into Nick's forehand return or goes body a lot. And it has been very, very effective against Kyrgios. So again, the ab thing is a concern for Rafa's serve, but at least tactically, it's a good matchup for Nadal against Nick's return.
And I happen to look at, I don't know if the IBM stats are right on this. They don't do this as well as Infosys does, but I happen to look at the serve placements right before we came on the air, and Nadal spread it around really nicely and did some good work on the body. And if IBM is correct, not sure about this, Frtiz did not serve one serve into Rafa's body, which really surprised me. But that's he does serve well, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, I mean, look, Rafa, because he's so far back, a little tougher to get it into the body. But man, I wish we saw more body serves. And Sinner went all of Wimbledon serving like every second serve into the body, and it worked brilliantly until Novak.
Well, because Novak moves around it pretty well, and Novak kind of took the measure. And then I think also in that match, Sinner became patterned, and Novak said, "Okay, I've read all your patterns. You got nothing. You're not bringing me anything new." And I think that's what's going to make this Kyrgios Nadal match interesting, is because Kyrgios has always got lots of tricks and things and concepts and ideas, it's a very interesting match. I think if Nadal was fully healthy, I'd favor him, but in this one, I think Kyrgios is probably is kind of favorite in a way. I don't know.
What's the over/under on the number of underarm serves?
Oh, we'll see it. We'll see it.
Yeah, but I think it'll be done at a 40 love or something kind of frivolous. I don't see Nick doing it on a big point, but hey, what do I know? I mean, this guy is so hard to understand in a way.
Great segue, Amy, because in Acapulco, when they played, the underarm serve was more like new. We hadn't seen it much, and Nadal seemed pretty rattled when Nick went to it in the third set. And that was a match that I think Kyrgios did get in Rafa's head a little bit. And I'm sure Nadal has vowed to not let that happen again. And then at Indian Wells, when they played this year, one of the things you noted, especially Amy, was that Nadal I'm missing the word, but he basically ignored everything that was going on with Nick and the umpire and the circus that can be happening on the other side of the court. So the mental management of this match, do you think that's how Nadal plays it? It's just utter, I don't care, I don't see it, just block it out.
That's Nadal also, but he just has to be doubly vigilant for that versus Kyrgios. I was at that match at Indian Wells, and I think that's how Nadal treats lots of matches, because he wants it to just be about the tennis, but he knows with Nick, there's this sideshow going on, so his concentration is going to become more vivid. I mean, the contrast, if you look at tennis as a personality struggle, it's never more clear than when these two play. It's a whole thing. If you look at it like I use school terms a lot. Nadal goes to school every day. He goes to the library, he does his homework, and that's what's made him a great player. And Nick is the kind of guy, hey, I don't need to do that stuff. You guys, oh God, what are you doing? Come on, you don't need to be. And so that's why he goes in and out, and that's why he's kind of a head scratcher. This is a guy who's admitted he's thrown matches when the Boston Celtics lose basketball games. I think if my favorite basketball team lost, I'd want to avenge them and win. But Nick has got his own stuff, and it's his own shell he puts around himself because he so wants to be cool.
Amy, what do you think of the mental components of managing a match against Nick?
I'm glad you brought that up, that I had said that, and I do remember that now. But Nadal hasn't totally been 100% businesslike in this Wimbledon because he had that incident, and he's got a lot to worry about with regard to his own body. So it's really, really a tough one to be just completely dialed in, tunnel vision, and ignore all the other stuff at this point, dealing with what you're dealing with and having to play Nick Kyrgios. I just, my fingers are crossed and everything is crossed that Nadal can play the match, because I'm really, this is a legit 100% real rivalry between these two guys, both from a tennis aspect and an interpersonal aspect. So this is one I really want to see.
Yeah, this has a little bit of that emotional quality that we had once upon a time with the likes of Connors and McEnroe and Lendl, a little bit more than just the business. And the one thing with the three, they pretty much are about the business. So they're pretty well behaved and pretty have this mutual respect for one another. And this one is a little different because I wonder how Nadal actually regards Kyrgios, though he knows he's a great player, but there's definitely some emotional aspects. And again, I'm hoping none of this match gets decided in the end by an injury.
Me too. You always want contrast in a tennis match. The best matches have contrast in styles, sometimes contrast in personalities, and man, it just doesn't get any sharper than Nadal versus Kyrgios. So looking forward to that and hoping for Nadal's good health. And should be quite the occasion for Novak Djokovic, looking to get back into a Wimbledon final. So much at stake for him against a British semifinalist in Cameron Norrie. Semifinals will be great. We look forward to covering it on 3. That'll do it for this episode. Remember, we're available on all podcast platforms. We appreciate it if you leave a rating and a review on Apple. And if you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. We will see you next time on the next episode of 3.